Now to explain why this is so important is former U.S. Attorney David Weinstein, an attorney practicing here in Miami. Thank you very much, David.
You're welcome.
I have a copy of the memo right here. I've been looking through it, and I'm looking on the second page where it says that the application for a warrant does not reveal the source of the funding for the dossier, right? Because it's saying that the application was based on that dossier, and we don't know where the funding came from, which later learned is from the Democratic National Committee and other sources. Are they trying to say basically that this is tainted evidence that was obtained?
That's exactly what they're trying to say, but they're leaving out the other sources of money that funded this dossier. It wasn't just the DNC and the Clinton campaign. When it all started, the Republicans were looking to fund the same dossier as well. So if you're going to reveal who funded this, why don't you put in there everybody who funded this?
Now, from a legal perspective, and you're looking at this, do you see this as bias one way or the other? Would be something like, for example, an attorney who is representing the best interest of his client would put forth?
That's absolutely what this is. This is one side of the story, and it's a story that's told with a slant towards suppressing this evidence, towards keeping it out of the eyes of the people who are doing the investigation, and the type of document that would be filed by people who were representing a target of an investigation. It's the type of pleading you'd see filed by the defense in a filed case.
Well, what impact does this have, in your opinion, on Robert Mueller and his investigation?
Well, it's certainly not going to make him stop doing what he's doing. It's going to embolden him to make sure he gets to the bottom of what took place, and if necessary, continue his investigation, present additional witnesses, and show just exactly how these holes are not what they appear to be, that there is other corroborating evidence, that there is information that was provided to the FISA court, and that more importantly, that this isn't where the investigation began. This is simply a part of the investigation, and it didn't taint the rest of his investigation.
Is this something that President Trump could now somehow use to back him up to fire, let's say, the Assistant Attorney General Rob Rosenstein or anybody else that he wanted to fire?
It's going to give him a rationale for firing him if that's what he chooses to do, but he needs to be careful what he bases his decision upon. People need to have all the information as to what took place, not just one side of the equation, because if he's going to fire him based on just what's contained here, and if it turns out that this isn't the full story and he's now obstructing an investigation, that's going to put him in a whole lot more hot water.
Now, David, this is from one side. This is the Republican side from the Intelligence Committee. We expect there may be the disclosure of a Democratic side. What do you expect to see in that memo?
Well, they're going to fill all the gaps that are missing. When was Steele compromised? When was he released? Was it after the investigation was well underway and not something the agent should have brought to the attention to the judge? Was his dossier just one part of many more items that were part of the probable cause? When did the investigation begin? How did it start? How does this really have not as much to do with the overall investigation as the rest of it? And how is it going to be shown that the Department of Justice was not impartial, that they were doing their job, that they weren't tainted, that they weren't trying to find another agenda? It's going to give them an opportunity to plug any holes that the Republicans think that they've opened here, and perhaps do more damage than whatever good the Republicans think they did by releasing this.
Well, we'll have to see what's in that side of the argument. That is expected to be released by the Intelligence Committee. David Weinstein, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Eliott. Always glad to help.
For your insight on this.